Hello, today's story is called Brave. Long ago, in the lush green highlands of Scotland, lived a princess named Merida. She had three mischievous little brothers named Hamish, Hubert, and Harris. Her father, King Fergus, was very jolly even though his leg had been bitten clean off by a demon bear many years ago. Merida's mom, Queen Eleanor, was loving but strict. She kept Merida very busy. As the future queen, Merida had many responsibilities. Her days were filled with long classes and do's and don'ts. But every once in a while, Merida had a day to herself. She would race her horse Angus through the forest, climb to the top of gigantic waterfalls, and shoot her trusty bow and arrow. One evening, Merida received some very unpleasant news. The lords of the three neighboring clans were going to present their firstborn sons as her suitors. There would be a competition. The winner would be given Merida's hand in marriage. Merida was upset. She didn't want to get married. But then she realized something. She was the firstborn too, and it was up to her to pick the competition. She chose archery. The day of the competition arrived. All the suitors lined up. The first one missed the bullseye completely. The second did not do much better. The third hit the bullseye, but Merida wasn't worried. "I'll be shooting for my own hand," she announced. When Merida fired at the target, her arrow split the third suitor's arrow right down the middle. She had beaten all three suitors. The clans were very angry. Merida's mother was furious. "You don't know what you have done," Queen Eleanor scolded when she and her daughter were alone. "It will be fire and sword if it's not set right." Merida was upset. She picked up her sword and slashed the family tapestry in two. Eleanor threw Merida's prized bow into the roaring fire. Heartbroken, Merida ran to the stable. She and Angus raced off into the forest. Suddenly, Angus stopped dead in his tracks. Merida flew through the air, landing hard on the ground. When she stood up, she found herself inside a ring of giant stones. Then she saw strange lights that seemed to be beckoning to her. They were the mysterious will-o'-the-wisps. Merida followed the lights to a cottage in the woods. She walked up and opened the door. Inside stood a witch. "I want a spell to change my mom," Merida cried. "That will change my fate." "Last time I did this was for a prince," the witch warned. "He demanded I give him the strength of 10 men. The witch began to toss strange things into her cauldron. There was a flash of brilliant green light. Then she pulled a small cake from the bubbling goo and gave it to Merida. Merida went home and gave the cake to her mother. As soon as Queen Eleanor took a bite, she began to feel woozy. Merida helped Eleanor up to her room and into bed. The queen tossed and turned. Then she rolled right off the bed. When she sat up, Merida screamed. The witch's spell had transformed her mother into a huge bear with large teeth and razor-sharp claws. Merida quickly realized that her mother was in great danger. Ever since King Fergus had lost his leg, he had made it his business to hunt down any bear that crossed his path. "If he so much as see you, you are dead," Merida shouted. "We've got to get out of the castle." Mother and daughter raced out of the castle and into the forest to find the witch and reverse the spell. They could not find her, but she had left Merida a message. "By the second sunrise, your spell will be permanent unless you remember these words. Fate be changed. Look inside. Mend the bond torn by pride." Exhausted, they fell asleep. They awoke to the first sunrise and saw that the will-o'-the-wisps had appeared. The wisps led them to the remains of an ancient castle where a prince had once lived. As Merida explored the ruins, she saw claw marks ripped into the stone. She realized something. The spell! It's happened before. The castle had belonged to the very same prince that the witch had spoken of. He had asked for the strength of 10 men, and she had changed him into Mor'du, the demon bear who had taken King Fergus' leg. Just then, Mor'du attacked. Merida and Queen Eleanor barely escaped. "If we don't hurry," Merida told her mother, "you'll become like Mor'du, a bear, a real bear forever." Luckily, Merida had an idea of how to break the spell. "Mend the bond torn by pride," she said, thinking of the witch's words. "The tapestry." They had to get back to the castle. When they arrived, the queen was able to hide in plain sight. A dreadful fight was going on. The clans were upset because Merida had not chosen a suitor. Merida realized she had to step in before it was too late. She took a deep breath and began to speak. Her mother gestured to her figure out what to say. Merida reminded everyone of the battles they had fought together. And then she spoke of breaking tradition and letting people decide for themselves whom they would love. To Merida's amazement, the clans and her mother liked her idea. Eager to tell his wife what had happened, King Fergus headed upstairs. He thought Eleanor was still sick, but to his great shock, he didn't find his queen. He discovered a bear instead. He drew his sword. Racing into the room, Merida tried to stop her father, but Fergus would not listen. He locked Merida in her room, and then he and his men chased Eleanor. With some help from her brothers, who had eaten the witch's cake and turned into bear cubs, Merida escaped. Grabbing the tapestry, a needle and thread, she and her brothers rode into the forest, Merida sewing frantically all the while. She had to end the curse before the men found her mother. The men had cornered Eleanor at the Ring of Stones and tied her up. Fergus stepped forward and raised his sword over his head. Merida had to do something. Thinking quickly, she threw herself in front of Queen Eleanor. "I'll not let you kill my mother," she shouted at King Fergus. Just then, a huge, horrible beast stepped into the ring and let out a terrible roar. It was Mor'du. He grabbed Fergus and flung him into the stones. Then he lunged at Merida. Seeing her daughter in danger, Eleanor gathered all her strength and rose up, breaking the ropes that bound her. She shoved Mor'du away from Merida. But Eleanor was no match for the demon bear. He threw her into a stone. Merida raced over to be by her mother's side. As the demon bear came closer, Merida and Eleanor clung to each other. Just as Mor'du was about to reach them, a broken stone toppled onto him. He was defeated. Moments later, the second sun began to rise. Merida quickly placed the mended tapestry over her mother and closed her eyes. When she opened them, Queen Eleanor was still a bear. I want you back, Mommy, Merida sobbed. I love you. She threw her arms around Eleanor's neck and nuzzled into the warm bare fur. As Merida's words faded, she felt a hand on her head, a human hand. She looked up right into her mother's beautiful face. Mom, you are back, Merida cried. Gratefully, she touched her mother's cheek. You changed. Oh, darling, we both have, Eleanor said tenderly. And it was true. Now Merida knew that the power to change her fate lived within her. She just had to be brave enough to do it. Thank you very much for listening. I hope that you enjoyed this story. Until the next one, take care.